Hey guys, welcome to the how-to headquarters for masonry. Today I want to share my secret recipe for thin veneer mortar. This is the mortar we use to adhere our stones, our thin granite stones to a wall, and it's the same mortar you could use to adhere any cultured stone to a wall. It's a sticky mix that you can butter on the back and put on the wall. You'll see other videos on how we apply the stone to the wall, but this is my secret recipe. Just like any chef, there's a lot of other ways to make your batch of cookies. It's not the only way. If you've got your own special way, please put it on the comments below, and please like and subscribe. But here's what we do. If you can get your hands on spec mix, adhered veneer, masonry mortar, it's a polymer, it's like mortar, and it has the lime and the Portland base and a sand base, but it also has a polymeric side to it, which are highly evolved chemicals that create a bond, especially well suited for the 3/8 to 1/2 inch mortar joint that's behind the stone that you're putting on the wall. I really like this. I'm going to put a recipe. If you can't get a hold of that spec mix, I'll put a recipe for how you can kind of make your own using polymeric thin set and mixing that with regular mortar. But I also sweeten it with a little bit of type S mortar. That's the straight mortar that if you were a large volume block mason or something, you'd be mixing this with sand. This does not have sand in it. This isn't the 80 bag pre-mixed mortar. This is straight mortar. Very powdery, no grains of sand in it. Don't let it touch your skin, you'll bleed and die forever. But here's what we do. Make sure you are especially in the summer months, store this stuff in a cool shaded place. You don't want your bags a zillion degrees, or when you mix all this stuff up, it's just going to cook fast, and by the time you're ready to apply it to the wall, it won't have any trowelability. So keep your water cool. I sometimes pull a fresh bunch of water right off the hose to keep it in the cooler temps and keep your mortar cool. Our average batch is start with 4 inches of water on the bottom of your bucket, and then I'm gonna put mortar just below that collar. I don't know what that is, 3.5, 4 gallons. Wear a face mask, particularly when you're doing this kind of stuff, because that dust over time is bad for you. Now, according to the directions, that's all you need to do. Just add water and mortar and you're done. A lot of times I'm applying this to concrete walls. The pores of the concrete wall that I'm trying to penetrate into are very small, and I find that adding that straight mortar gives me a little bit of a smaller aggregate that works into there, and strangely enough, it actually increases the pan life or the bucket life of the mortar. So in a batch of that size, make sure this isn't clumpy. When you pick it up at the lumber yard, feel the bags, and don't get the bags that have absorbed water and have a bunch of clumps. So in a bucket this size, I would add probably what would come out to 1 heaping block trowel worth of mortar. Then comes the mixing. This is super important. This Milwaukee Magnum has, I believe, a 1200 RPM. A lot of mud mixers that are made just for mixing mud are lower geared so they can really handle mixing mortar, which is fine if it's a just add water mortar situation. If you read the fine print of a spec mix, it requires high speed mixing because you're breaking the polymers, and it is crazy different. This stuff is garbage if you mix it in a wheelbarrow and just add water, or you mix it with a low RPM mixer, because you didn't activate a whole bunch of the polymers that were intended to be activated. So this is probably the most important part. Make sure you have, and I like these, we've been doing this 17 years. We do a couple thousand square feet every year. This is the 3rd Milwaukee Magnum I've run through in 17 years. This thing does handle it well. A sheetrocker showed me using this setup, and this is a sheetrock. I'll put the links to all the stuff I use down in the description below. But this is a sheetrock mud mixer. If it's a small project and you don't want to pay the 50 bucks for a mud mixer, you can stop at your paint store and for 8 bucks you can get one of these. And you'll get what you pay for, but if it's not a big project, you can whip it up with this. And for years I used one of these and a DeWalt electric or battery operated drill. Will work, but if you're doing any volume, this is what you want. I put that water in first because I want to give a chance of not binding this mortar up. And that works fairly well. So it's extra juicy at first. That's the best way to get that high RPMs, is to mix this thing in a soupy rate, and then toward the end we're going to add a little bit more dry material. But if you read the directions, and this is nuts, it says to mix for 5 minutes at high RPMs, then wait for about 2 minutes as it stands or slakes, and then do a final whipping for a minute after that. So I'm not going to bore you for the 5 minutes, but I'm going to sit here at high RPM, so I'm going to have that thing squeezed right to the max, and I'm going to think about my day and other things and lose my mind for 5 minutes as I'm letting those polymers just get beaten to oblivion. Then you let it stand, and we'll be back in just a second. Yeah! So it's nice in the course of a day to have a time to be quiet and have nothing else to think about besides not spreading mortar all over your feet. So we got that done. Now, this stuff is a little extra wet, and that's the way I wanted it, to get it really whipped up. The last bit I do here is a little bit of tempering. We usually add in an acrylic bonding additive. There is something like that already in the spec mix, but this is a material that sometimes will apply. It's good to apply to an old wall because it actually increases the adhesion between old and new concrete, increase the adhesion of a cold joint, and it helps in the mortar. I'm going to put a link below. Depending on the time of the year, some of these accelerate the cure. That's a pain in the neck in the summertime because I got this big bucket of mortar. I got all these stones that said I'm not that fast. I want this mortar to last me at least a half an hour before it's gone hard. We don't want to put accelerating additive in there that tightens it right up in 6 minutes. So there's going to be a couple things below. In the winter or in the fall, it can be a little bit of a different game that takes forever for it to cure, and I use a different bonding agent at that point that kind of accelerates it to optimize that cure. So there'll be a mention of that, but usually at this point I would put some of that acrylic bonding agent in there on top. A little bit of magic never hurt anybody. That volume also depends on the material that you have and how vital your adherence is to the wall. Depending on what your substrate is, sometimes you've got to make it stickier. You've got to work with smaller batches because you've just got to keep that stickiness. I got to mention though that this mortar, when you've done it right, is phenomenally strong. I have had to, in about 3 days, it comes to about 80% of its strength. I had a mantle once that they ended up deciding on the fireplace they wanted to drop the mantle, so I had to pull some of the stones about 3 days after I pulled it off. I had a chisel in there pounding on it, and when I finally got that stone off, on the back of the stone was the metal lath jammed onto the back of the, completely glued onto the back of the stone, and it was a Durarock substrate, and the chunks of Durarock were glued onto the metal lath. And that's what I had on the back of my rock. That's the kind of adhesion you want. If you're putting thousands of square feet of this stuff a year up, the liability of having a rock or a whole project go bad because of mortar is enough to keep you up at night. And that's why we try to use the best. The mortar makes the mason. And that's why we like to use this, the best possible system we can here. So I've added a little extra dust to make it a little stiffer. I might not be able to hold the 1200 psi once that binds up. It's got 1200 RPM once that binds up. But I'm going to get the consistency that I want in order to be applying this to the wall. So I'll usually have a trowel nearby and see if I'm somewhere close. You got to keep it a little bit on the oozier side because now I'm going to go away for 5 minutes, or 1 to 5 minutes, while that thing stands. A slaking process where it's an early bind in those polymers that you want to happen, tighten up, come back in 5 minutes, just whip it. I mean, they say a minute, it's just a few seconds of waking those polymers back up again, and now you have a pretty nice, workable mortar for a little while to work on. Thank you so much for watching. We have a lot more videos on how we apply the stone to the wall, different stone styles, patios, everything masonry. We've been doing this for about 20 years, and I'm tired of it, and I want to share everything we know so you can all do it yourself. Please like and subscribe to this channel, and if you have any other ideas, any of your favorite mixtures of how you like to bake cookies, please put that in the comments below. Thank you.